What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host and astronaut aboard the Pitts 8 Moon Expedition, Pete Rogers. And I am joined today by fellow nerds. We have the Duck Father, runner-up on the Great Russell Wilson Cooking Show, resident old man Clark Barnes, and the lead saxophonist for De'Ami Brown and the Downtown Funky Crown Band, the working girl Jordan Smith, joining us. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Doing well. We are 2 days out from just a really, really glorious holiday, and your boy is hungry.
Ooh.
Hungry.
I just what was it? I think it was CBS's Fantasy or whatever tweeted out, like, build your ideal Thanksgiving plate. Yeah, Fantasy Football Today tweeted out, like, build your Thanksgiving fantasy lineup with $20, and then had your main course, potato dish, side dish to it, then dessert, and the $5 to $1 thing. And I spent way too much time on there, like, debating what exactly is like the perfect combination of things, because there's certain things you just obviously need to have. I personally, stuffing is like the number one thing in Thanksgiving for me. Like, need myself some good stuffing, extra gravy, and then I always pecan pie they have as a $1 item for dessert. Pecan pie is like a phenomenal Thanksgiving dessert. Wow, how is that only $1? That was a steal.
Pecan pie, number one dessert,
my
just in general.
Clark.
No, it's all right. Regional differences aside, we agree on the pie.
Yes.
And so I grew up in the southern part of the United States where stuffing is not how you do it. You do dressing. So stuffing is like regular bread. Dressing is more like cornbread. What say y'all about dressing versus stuffing?
Well, being up north here, we definitely do stuffing. It's like a full-on different recipes and different ways to approach it. In terms of pecan pie, I'm not sure I'm like the biggest fan, but I just wanted to say that.
So it all the different ways. Yeah. Pecan pie, like bourbon pecan pie, is a staple of my family Thanksgiving. Like, I just don't, $1, that was a bargain. But yes, the greatest holiday of the year is quickly upon us, because it is a holiday of food, of family, and of football. And this is a football podcast.
And of joy. So the whole holiday season, a lot of different cultures, it's starting to get cold. We're going to be around each other for a long time. Let's dig in and be nice to each other. That's what I like to really embrace with the all of the holiday season.
From Halloween till New Year's.
Until January 2nd, and you can all go F yourselves again.
Then it's everyone for themselves. We're on to 2022.
Flag Day.
Awesome. Well, this is a new release time. Then we're coming out Tuesday night / Wednesday for you, and we're reconfiguring the show. We're combining the Monday Takeaway Waiver Wire show with Jordan and my starts and sits show to make one middle of the week full conglomeration. We're going to talk takeaways. We're going to talk waiver wire targets for week 11. And then we're going to shift our attention to week 12 and give you guys some early starts and sits from each position. So let's start, with some week 11 takeaways. And Jordan, why don't you start us off? What was your biggest takeaway from week 11 football?
My biggest takeaway in this past week was kind of like confirming this prior that I held for like a week. I just wanted to be sure that I was certain of it. And I think it's that the Philadelphia Eagles are starting to figure some things out. Not just in like the real football sense, but in a fantasy football sense. They've got Jalen Hurts, who's according to Sleepers, the QB1. He has been leading the league in QBR for the past 5 weeks. They're third in rushing offensive DVOA and 11th by pass offense DVOA. So they're being really efficient suddenly and moving the ball really well after we had a lot of reservations about them because we were really upset about Miles Sanders' usage and things of that nature. But Miles went down, the rest of the team got healthier, and it's been the whole surge has been because of this offensive line. They've been playing absolutely incredible. Lane Johnson.
You know, if Jordan's going to be talking about giving praise to any team, it has to come down to the offensive line.
Well, look, if we're talking about the Eagles offense, we're talking about Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and Miles Sanders, now that he's back and actually put up some pretty decent yards on the ground this week. It starts with the offensive line, because those are the guys that are they're the big movers up front. They're the ones that are clearing lanes and keeping Jalen Hurts protected when, of the 15 times they do decide to pass with Jalen Hurts during the game. To expand on my fantasy analysis about the running game, the rushing attack for Philadelphia, and how that's been coming on the past couple of weeks. For running backs with 16 to 87 rushing attempts, this is per Football Outsiders, Jordan Howard is the number one running back by DVOA and number two by defense adjusted yards above replacement. Boston Scott, who was also getting some tick in there while Miles Sanders was out, he's fifth by DYAR and third by DVOA. So now that Sanders is back, if he decides to stop fumbling the football and actually puts in a really good workload on the ground, it seems like they're already set with him as RB1, even though these other guys have been playing more efficiently and effectively. He could still cede some goal line carries to Jordan Howard, but I don't see that being a spectacularly huge problem, especially since Miles Sanders can get involved in the passing game. And I want to just shout out Devontae Smith too, who has just quietly been the most efficient rookie wide receiver this season. He's sitting at 14th overall by DVOA. And he's outpacing the other rookie wide receivers by a lot. You got Jamar Chase at 26th, Kadarius Toney at 39th, Elijah Moore at 42, even though he's been coming on lately, and Jalen Waddle at 46. So we all know those guys have been having some pretty good seasons thus far, but Devontae Smith has been the one that I feel like is going to continue his climb. I think the other guys might be a little bit more hit or miss, which they've shown that's been the case so far this year.
Yeah, Devontae Smith's consistency has really kind of leveled off to a really high, a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 any given week. The backfield, though, Jordan Howard is likely going to miss week 12 with a knee sprain. And that just if you can go get Boston Scott and start him because this rushing game has been so potent, even with multiple running backs in that backfield. Miles Sanders had 16 carries for 94 yards last week, but Jordan Howard in that RB2 role still saw 63 yards on 10 carries. And if Boston Scott steps into that role against the Giants defense, that's, not good. That's a good streaming option there, running back. And as someone who drafted Jalen Hurts as my QB2 in my home league, loving the fact that the Eagles are finally figuring out how to use him effectively. And that is increasing his rushing workload and making him, average 60 plus yards rushing a game, which is terrific. Love to see it.
Yeah. And even if you're a little hesitant to buy into the Eagles resurgence, their upcoming schedule is the Giants, the Jets, the Washingtonian footballists, the Giants, the Washingtonian footballists.
That's a great stretch of games.
So Washington's no cupcake, but I mean, the positive trend should continue for the Eagles, just looking at opponent, let alone the better play we're seeing.
Yeah, no, this offense is definitely one after, and Jordan and I can attest to this, after we had no idea ever had to pick Eagles games leading up to this week. They seem to be getting things together, and fantasy wise, this now seems like an offense that you can start buying into and starting your guys, your studs in that game with confidence moving forward. Clark, what was your biggest takeaway from week 11?
So this is pretty simple, but Cam Newton is going to be the starting quarterback for the Panthers for the rest of the year, barring some tragedy. And that's going to kind of cap his upside. I think that quarterback 4 to 8 is a great range. That's about where he's going to be. And then I just mentioned this because of what it might change for guys like Robbie Anderson, who we've been kind of waiting on. Cam seems to be throwing the ball a little bit better to Robbie Anderson. Now that's not saying much. 1 is a lot more than 0. But Robbie Anderson may be being involved. So if he's been dropped and you have the extra roster spot, maybe go pick him up. Or if you've been hanging on to him, maybe give it a couple of more weeks because it looks like he's starting to get brought into the fold. This, Cam being in there sort of limits Christian McCaffrey, I guess, technically, but just Christian McCaffrey being on a better team is so much upside for Christian McCaffrey that I'm not worried about that.
No, I mean, also DJ Moore, like DJ Moore managers can celebrate.
Yeah, and my first note here is DJ Moore is still number one.
Yeah.
And like nothing's changing, which is good. And then everything else I said.
Yeah. No, Cam Newton is a guy, he's 58% rostered in sleeper leagues. And if you can go get him, like he is, like you said, Clark, I mean, he's a mid to high end QB1, it feels like, on a weekly basis with his rushing floor. And adding that at this point in the season can be that difference maker that, you know, as we get prepped for playoff position, like that's a huge add this late in the season. And he just makes the Panthers offense look a whole lot better than what it looked like with Sam Darnold under center.
Yeah, I like Cam being back in Carolina just for the vibes mostly. I think it's great that
they are immaculate.
They are immaculate. He going back to the team that drafted him, and by all accounts, he just kind of walks in and already has the locker room. Like people just love this guy and they love playing for him. So I feel like if you're a person that likes to take a stroll down narrative lane with us every now and then, that's something that you can grab onto. And I just like the Carolina offense, even though, you know, their record hasn't exactly been as immaculate as the vibes, but like their offense is fun. They can do some damage and do some things. They haven't had Christian McCaffrey. They've had a kind of a lame duck Sam Darnold before Cam Newton got there. And now I think it could be fun again. And I think that they could pull out some pretty surprising victories here.
Yeah. It's a good thing they picked up Sam Darnold's, you know, option.
Well, I mean, so at the beginning of the year, things looked pretty good with Sam Darnold, and they took a tragic turn for the worse. What I really want to mention, if we're going to talk about vibes here, is their relationships can be very complicated. And imagine a front office who let Cam go in kind of a controversial way, not a horrible way, but like he'd given them a lot and they let him go. But them being able to reach out to Cam, and then Cam being, you know, mature enough to come back. That's just a really cool story of like, you know, even if things don't end poorly, you know, don't burn that bridge, because you never know what might come around later.
And like Jordan said, like, it's just the NFL, there are always players who people point to. It's like the NFL is a better place with this player in it. And it's like Cam Newton, the NFL is a better place with Cam Newton in it. And the fact that he's back in Carolina and like playing as a QB1 in an offense that has, you know, a great scheme. Like we all give praise to Matt Rule and to not Joe Barry. Is it Joe Barry? Who's the OC for Carolina? Anyways, just the fact that, and with those weapons all around him, that it's a beautiful landing spot for him to kind of rekindle things. Panthers
a guy from LSU,
offensive coordinator Joe Brady.
You were right there.
I was more or less there. I was right next door to it on Narrative Street. My biggest takeaway from week 11, you talked about the rookie wide receivers, Jordan. Elijah Moore is like quarterback proof. I don't know how he manages to do it, but this man since week 7 has been the wide receiver 3 in half-point PPR, despite playing with Zack Wilson, Joe Flacco, and Mike White throughout those. He's cycled through 3 different quarterbacks and has still been able to put up elite fantasy numbers. It's something where if he is available in your league, which he's like 70% roster and sleeper, so it's likely not, but if he is, 100% go get him. He is the number 1 player you should be going to get and burning all your fab on, because he's proven that no matter who's under center, he is going to produce. Now, Zack Wilson is back, which is, you know, maybe good news. Like potentially that's who the Jets want to succeed and be their quarterback of the future. But with the Texans, Saints, Dolphins, Jaguars, Buccaneers, like all of those defenses still on the schedule, there's a real chance for Elijah Moore to like continue to be a high end wide receiver 2 from here on out.
I haven't sat down and like dissected a Jets game in a while because, you know, I enjoy my life. But some trends I've noticed from just monitoring Elijah Moore and the whole Jameson Crowder of it all is that it seems like Elijah Moore's getting more opportunities in the offense. I'm not sure if he's necessarily playing more snaps or getting more looks, but it just seems like Elijah Moore is getting more trust from the coaches right now. And last week he wasn't doing much until he was like he's had like 0 points until like the second half of the game, and then suddenly he blows up and has like 25. He's been really insane, and he's been really good finding the end zone too. I'm hoping that doesn't regress at all, but he's just been really dialing it up, even though he's had, like you said, Pete, 3 different QBs in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and arguably the QB that people are most excited about is the one that he's done the worst with. So we don't know if there were just some rookie jitters from the head coaching staff not wanting to get Elijah Moore the ball early, and he's just proven now that he's worth it. Or is there a Zack Wilson problem? The reason I bring this up is Zack Wilson's coming back. Apparently his backups are too injured to play, so they're going to shove the franchise.
Well, they're both in COVID protocol. I think Mike White has tested positive, and Joe Flacco is close contact on the list. So yeah, so it's Zack Wilson or bust, or Blake Bortles if they bring in journeyman.
Unfortunately, Moore is doing what everyone said that he was going to do.
Yeah.
And that's always tough. You know, you watch these guys play in college and they all look amazing. And sometimes it just doesn't transfer to the NFL. But Elijah Moore's doing what he did in college in the NFL and looks really good doing it. So super exciting. Really great wide receiver class. We've mentioned it a few times, but like a lot of these guys turned out to be like, yeah, if you liked these guys, you were right.
Yeah. Also, if Zack Wilson pans out to be even a starting caliber quarterback, this is a hell of a draft by the Jets, because you also have Michael Carter in this draft, who has also looked really good. And he's injured. So we're going to talk some waiver wire targets. Look at that segue. It was incredible. And with Elijah Carter, excuse me, I'm combining many names right there. With Michael Carter out for 2 to 3 weeks with I think it's a high ankle sprain is what he's attributed to. One of my top waiver targets for this week is Ty Johnson. Now, obviously this show is coming out Tuesday night / you're listening to Wednesday. So waivers might have already run. The likelihood that Ty Johnson's going to be a very popular name. So you might not have already gotten him. So we have lots more guys to talk about, but Johnson replacing injured Michael Carter for the next couple of weeks. I know Tevin Coleman is there, and Tevin Coleman will get rushing touches, but the Ty Johnson's work in the passing game is something that we love to see, and for fantasy purposes makes him, I would say, the better back to pick up between the two. 28% roster in sleeper leagues. He's a top target for me this week, going into what hopefully should be a pretty sizable starting role for him moving forward.
Yeah, I like the move, and I wouldn't personally bother with Tevin Coleman if you were going to reach. I think if you're going to reach and hope and pray that P. Ryan would be a better option, but I would probably just go Johnson or bust here. Yeah, for the Jets backfield. Jordan, who's the top waiver target for you this week?
One of my top waiver wire ads would be, let's go down to Cedric Wilson in Dallas. He's only 8% owned in fantasy leagues. That's on Sleeper, that is. And the Cowboys, who are going to be playing on Thanksgiving, it's a short week, so CeeDee Lamb is unlikely to roll out there with the concussion that he sustained on Sunday. And Amari Cooper has been out, so he doesn't seem like he's going to be going there. There'll be plenty of passes to go around. There's Michael Gallup, still Dalton Schultz, but we've seen Cedric Wilson have some pretty big games. He's had, I believe, 2 games so far with at least 20 points or something close to it. And he already saw 7 targets come his way on Sunday. So like the targets have already started to drift there once they lost some of their better wide receivers. And they also play a Vegas team that has surrendered the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers in the past 2 weeks. So I think Vegas is kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
It's a good time to get him.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great call. Cedric Wilson seems like an ideal wide receiver streamer this week. If you need wide receiver help over the Thanksgiving holiday week.
And the only thing holding him back is just all the other fantastic wide receivers. When he's had a chance to play, he's done well for fantasy.
Yeah, with him and Michael Gallup likely being Dak's, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2s. Both those guys, like you said, Clark, are talented enough that they will put forward wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 outings when they're given that workload. Clark, who's the top target for you this week?
Yeah, so this is definitely keeping in mind that we'll be doing this after waivers run. So Tyrod Taylor and the Texans are having a hard time, but they've got a good schedule coming up with the Jets, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Jags, and then the Chargers and the 49ers. So if you're super desperate at tight end, Tyrod Taylor's, sort of passing, but getting those cheater rushing points for you too. And the Texans schedule is just so soft. He's available. I think he's rostered in about 15% of CBS leagues. So if you're desperate, this is a good week for Tyrod.
Yeah, especially going up against the Jets. Tyrod has had, again, he is that one of those quarterbacks with that high rushing floor. And you absolutely love to see that. I have Tyrod in one of my dynasty leagues and have been pretty pleased with, when he's on the field and healthy.
You're all welcome, by the way, for Cam Newton coming back. I held on to him in 3 dynasty leagues and dropped him 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to take credit for
his glorious return. Speaking of guys who might be deeper down waivers, who you might still be able to get after waivers run, though there was some breaking news that might boost this guy's name up, but that's Dontrell Hillier for the Titans. He came in signed off their practice squad against the Texans, played 63% of the snaps, had 7 carries for 35 yards, but also did a lot of work in the passing game, caught 8 balls on 10 targets for 47 yards. And seemingly played well enough for the Titans that they waived Adrian Peterson Tuesday night. So Dontrell Hillier seems to have locked in a roster spot and a pretty sizable workload going up against a Patriots ground game or ground defense, which hasn't been great this year against fantasy running backs. They've been allowing, I want to confirm these numbers, but I feel like they've been allowing kind of in that top 10 of PPR points to running backs this year. Let's do a quick gander. Yeah, they're tied for 20th in fantasy points, or the 20th fewest. So flip that around. What is that? 12th most? That, you guys, is math done quickly live on the show. 12th most fantasy points to running backs. If the Titans are, the Titans offense is so banged up that who knows who's going to play, but he's a target. He's someone who I would target, especially in really deep leagues, 0% rostered in sleeper. But if he is going to continue to play upwards of 60% of the Titans snaps at running back, that's a guy totally worth rostering, in my opinion. Jordan, you have any more waiver targets? I know you had a laundry list before.
Yeah, I do have some. I think Clark is going to touch on this later, but I said Rex Burkhead as well. To take a flyer on him, he's 0% owned on sleeper. Like literally no one in this world believes in Rex Burkhead, so he's super available. And he carried the ball 18 times last week. He only managed to get 40 yards out of that, but Ingram has been shipped out of town. Philip Lindsay has been cut. So the Texans running back room is just fairly empty. So this is a possible position where opportunity is just king. And then lastly, I'll say to go ahead and grab and stash Juwan Johnson for the New Orleans Saints. He started out extremely hot with like 2 touchdowns on 3 catches in week 1. And then he's kind of fallen behind on the depth chart. He was a healthy scratch last week. But the Saints starting tight end, who is really starting to come on the past couple of weeks, Adam Troutman, he's going to be out for about a month and a half now. Trevor Siemian, I think, was a part of that little mini burst out that he was starting to have. He was starting to gain traction, and I think Siemian could be more willing to throw to his tight ends going forward. And Juwan Johnson could step in and be that guy. So he's just a guy that you got to grab and stash, and maybe he turns into something. Yeah.
He's also one of those guys, like I know Clark loves Donald Parham. He did a pronunciation on Twitter. I think it's Parham. Anyways, but it's one of those like 6'6" ex-basketball guys who in the red zone, they just body and box out and come down with the catch. And Juwan Johnson has a similar body type and can just sky for touchdowns. And touchdowns are king, especially when it comes to tight ends, because these guys average 3 catches a game. Unless you're Travis Kelce, and then you're a glorified wide receiver. Clark, any final waiver targets for you?
We'll wait till the start sits and roll it all together.
Perfect. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. All right. Before we turn our attention to week 12, I wanted to tell you, dear listeners, about our Patreon, patreon.com/nerdballff. We have all kinds of perks for those who wish to join, including you could join our staff Discord channel where we talk football all season, our starts and sit hotline where you can ask us your most pressing starts and sits questions this week, and we'll get back to you instantaneously. And you can submit questions to the podcast to be answered live on the show. So if you want to support us, go to patreon.com/nerdballff. All right, let's get into week 12 starts and sits. We each have a start or a sit for each position. So hopefully we should cover all, give you guys, dear listeners out there, at least a couple of names to play this early in the week. And obviously look for more starts and sits content over on nerdballff.com, as we will be having that come out throughout the week. Let's start with quarterbacks. Let's start with Clark. Who are you starting or sitting at quarterback this week, Clark?
Yeah, it's a start. And this is for if you went out and speculated and picked up Cam and already have a good QB and you're kind of on the wire or leaning one way or the other. The Dolphins have been giving up the 5th most points to opposing QBs. Cam's going to be in his, third technically game with the Panthers. Already put up QB8 numbers on a really pedestrian stat line. So really the sky's the limit against the team, the Dolphins, who with Tua Tagovailoa score points. So this one could get super interesting. If you went and got Cam and you're not going to start him this week, well then you should drop him, because why'd you get him?
What are you doing then? But don't drop him, because if you drop him, then someone else in your league will add him, and then you'll just feel silly for doing that. I'm trying to quickly see how the Dolphins do. Okay, but yeah, no, that's a great call. Just because Cam Newton, I mean, he's Cam Newton, and we love some Cam Newton. Jordan, what quarterback do you like this week?
So I like Taylor Heinicke this week as a start. Right now he's not really lighting things up. He's only QB 15, but that's enough for a good start. And he's only 21% rostered in sleeper leagues. He's had 20 and 28 points though since the bye. So I am hoping that means that he really started to turn a corner in terms of commanding this offense. They play a Seahawks team this week that is 25th against the pass by DVOA. So they're a team that Washington can definitely move the ball on. Heineke can run. He's not afraid to scoot on the ground and gets you some yardage that way. His passing yards kind of leave something to be desired. Like, he can find the end zone perfectly fine. He can complete passes and whatnot, but it's the yardage. He's not a 300 yard per game type of passer. And hopefully that sort of thing changes. He's been targeting like DeAndre Carter more, and hopefully my guy De'Ami Brown starts to pop a little bit downfield. That will juice those numbers up real good. So Taylor Heinicke.
Yeah. Plus he's coming off of 3 touchdowns against a really good Carolina Panthers secondary. And so that's a performance you're hoping he can build off of. Plus we've seen it before back in week 2 and 5. What were we saying?
That's another thing, is those 2 games I mentioned were against Carolina, like you said, a tough defense, and the Buccaneers, which is another tough defense.
Yeah. Yeah. And Seattle seems like a hot mess right now. And a team that no one wants to continue to play for, including Pete Carroll, who's going to go back to college football after this year, maybe? Does Pete Carroll get a job after this? I don't know.
It'd be addition by subtraction in the meanest
nothing
of senses.
Nothing is more addition by subtraction than the Giants just firing Jason Garrett at OC. Jump aboard the Giants bandwagon, baby. This offense is suddenly going to blow up. Freddie Kitchens is getting promoted into the OC. Daniel Jones for the win. Clark is so skeptical.
Sigmund Bloom tweeted something about this. I really like Sigmund Bloom, football guys. If you don't follow him, you should. He's excellent. His tweet was something along the lines of, this is why when you know the relationship is going to end, it's better to go ahead and just get it over with and end it. So that you're not continuously embarrassing yourself for, anyway, it was a tweet. It wasn't that long. But the point is, like, isn't it obvious that the Giants are going to get rid of Dave Gettleman? And then, so to do this like half-hearted measure now,
it's a total try to save
what are you
face.
doing?
Yeah.
And like, what, Matt Nagy is like gonna get let go after the Thanksgiving game? just like ending relationships is hard. I get it. No one wants to be mean. There's a lot of emotions involved, but like, don't put it off. Don't go halfway. Like, if you're going to end it, just end it.
Yeah.
I kind of thought Jason Garrett made a blood oath with a sea witch, so he couldn't be fired from a position for 10 years at a time. That theory's out the window.
That's the sea witch has let him down.
Have I been reading this wrong? You might be right. I don't think that he's been fired. I think he's been moved.
No. Jason Garrett got fired. Did he get moved or did he get fired?
I don't know. Controversy on the RB or on the
I think he's been chosen to be moved on from. But that is
we'll stats and research this during the
we'll stats and research it.
They're coming up with more and more creative ways to say a coach got fired.
Bears, by the way, because I know you guys listen to the podcast, fire Matt Rule fire Matt Nagy and then give Greg Roman all of the dollars he wants and build an offense around Justin Fields.
They can't fire Matt Nagy. They have to honorably discharge him.
They have to demote him to special teams coordinator. All right.
Hold on. So we have definitive.
What did they say?
We have definitive non-definitiveness, which creates controversy. From Giants.com reporter Michael Eisen, Jason Garrett relieved of duties as offensive coordinator. So the team likely fed Mr. Eisen that line. Oh man. Which means Jason Garrett's still getting paychecks, baby.
Jason Garrett's still getting paid. The
C-Pact is intact.
The Sea Witch never lets you down. We're still talking quarterbacks. I'm streaming Mac Jones this week. 45% rostered on sleeper leagues. Titans have given up the second most yards and fantasy points to quarterbacks, and Mackie J has been a QB1 over the last 2 weeks, including 3 touchdowns versus the Browns. His Patriots offense, the Patriots, number 1 team in the AFC all of a sudden. Classic Bill Belichick. This is exactly how he wants it to go. But this offense is starting to click with Mac Jones getting connected with his wide receivers and Hunter Henry obviously making plays. So I like Mac Jones in this game against a Titans defense that hasn't been able to stop anything this year.
Hasn't been able to stop anyone except the super easy 225 yards passing for Tyrod Taylor that I just thought was such a thing.
Lock. Hey man, there's nothing the Titans do better than losing games to the teams with 1 or 0 wins.
They are becoming Steelers-esque in their ability to play up and down to their opponents.
It is quite incredible. They're also dealing with like a litany of injuries, but losing whatever they're however many games have they won. Where are the Titans?
When your running back has missed 2 or 3 weeks of football and finally another running back surpasses them for the rushing title.
Kind of a big deal. Big loss. The Titans, 2 of the 3 Titans losses this year, the Jets and the Texans. All right, let's move on to running backs. Jordan, what's your play at running back this week?
This week I would look to sit Javonte Williams if that was a route that you were going to go. So despite showing some prowess running the ball, Javonte Williams has still just taken a backseat to Melvin Gordon in the Denver Broncos rushing attack. He's only gotten over 50% of the carries in 3 different games this season, which isn't a lot. And a lot of that has also, though, been attributed to just fewer positive game scripts for Denver to keep the running game viable. They don't really need to have the running back out there that's grinding out the tough yards when they're down by 15 points. So that's unfortunate in that regard. And even though they're going to be playing the Chargers, which have just an unbelievably bad rushing defense, like they're 32nd by DVOA against the rush and like 9th against the pass somehow. Actually, not somehow. It's because if it's so easy to run against the Chargers, you don't have to pass it. But I still don't think that's going to be the case this week. I still think Melvin Gordon is a relatively good play, but Javonte Williams might need to score a touchdown to salvage his fantasy day.
Yeah, he just feels like until he gets that workload locked in, because of Melvin Gordon being the red zone guy in Denver, that until Javonte Williams gets like the games where he's had big ones have been like he gets, he had a big game against the Cowboys, but that was 17 carries for 111 yards. And like even that was his big, second biggest game, because he didn't, the other times when he scored a touchdown, obviously that gets more points. So like he needs huge outputs in order to be a fantasy viable running back. And with Melvin Gordon still on that roster, I think he's a flex play, but certainly don't be starting him anything more than that this week. Would be my call. Also, as a potential sit this week, I'm sitting Myles Gaskin against a very good Panthers defense. We just talked about them, but Myles Gaskin is the prized pupil of inconsistency. He, among the top 24 fantasy running backs, he has our second highest net consistency rating, meaning that he is one of the most volatile and inefficient top 24 running backs in fantasy this year. And his odd even week splits are hilarious this season. His week 5, he was the RB4 in half point PPR. Week 6, the RB49. Week 7, the RB10. Week 8, RB38. Week 9, RB15, week 10, RB42, and week 11, RB9. So quite literally, since week 5, if it's an odd week, Myles Gaskin is going to ball out. If it's an even week, he's going to give you nothing. It's an even week, and he's going up against the Panthers' top fantasy defense, allowing just 18.6 fantasy points per game to opposing backfields. Myles Gaskin is definitely a back I'm fading this week.
It doesn't help that Miami offensive line can't move anyone. Like that's an attribution to the volatility of Myles Gaskin's game. And if you've watched him play, you've seen Myles Gaskin kind of scrape for yards and do a lot of that stuff on his own without really a lot of clean rushing lanes. So that explains a lot of the volatility. I'm not sure if it's going to hold up every other evenly, but I feel like we get a player like this every season where it's just like, you got to catch him
perfect
on the good
every
weeks.
other. Got to catch him on the right weeks.
We got to start tracking that, I think.
That'll be the next stat that NerdBall exclusively offers, is their even odd week splits. It's important to know. Clark, what's your running back play this week?
So this, I think, is going to sound silly based on the guys that you have brought up, but this is a desperation time. All of my guys are hurt and the Thursday games are screwing me. Rex Burkhead is my like hope and a prayer start this week. Jordan mentioned a lot of stuff already. Basically, this is an argument of Houston has 2 running backs left. And if you're desperate for running back, you'll probably get 40 or 50 yards out of both of them.
Well, and they're going up against Jets defense that is like giving up 30 fantasy points per game to opposing backfield. Like they are the absolute worst defense against running backs. And they're giving up 17 touchdowns on the ground, 4 touchdowns through the air, 655 yards through the air too. And Rex Burkhead, obviously with the Patriots, has shown that he can do both the ground work, operate on the ground and through the air. So 18 carries going into a matchup against a terrible Jets defense. Like I really don't hate this play at all, Clark. I actually think that Rex Burkhead could be a really solid flex play this week, especially, for the leagues where you need to deal with injuries or deal with buys or deal with just kind of like underperforming players. And you want to take a risk.
I feel like if you've played fantasy football in the past 5 years, you've said to yourself, fuck it, I'm playing Rex Burkhead this week. Like I've definitely done that before.
It's an annual occurrence. The fuck it, it's Rex Burkhead week. And this is that week. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. I'll start us off with wide receivers. I'm starting Darnell Mooney this week against the Lions. He's had 22 targets for the Bears over the last 2 games. 16 of those came last week against the Ravens. What's more impressive to me is the fact that he had 228 air yards against the Ravens, which is just utterly absurd. They were just bombing the ball out to Darnell Mooney. He finished with 121 and a touchdown. He is the clear wide receiver 1 in Chicago. Even if Allen Robinson comes back and plays, he was out against the Ravens last week, and he's unlikely to play on the short week this week against the Lions on Thanksgiving. But even if Robinson does step onto the field, Darnell Mooney clearly is the wide receiver 1 there. And I love the fact, Justin Fields is out with a rib injury and Andy Dalton will start. But I really like the fact that as soon as Andy Dalton stepped onto the field last week in place of Justin Fields, he hit Mooney on a 60-yard touchdown bomb. So clearly there's a connection there. And against a average Lions secondary, I'm starting Darnell Mooney as like a high-end wide receiver 3, maybe low-end wide receiver 2, but a guy who has serious wide receiver 1 value, or serious wide receiver 1 upside, given what we've seen recently.
Yeah, I actually have the same guy written down here as my start for
Jordan and I are on the same page.
I mean, you got to have something interesting to look at when you're watching Andy Dalton battle Tim Boyle for the turkey leg.
God bless Thanksgiving, baby.
I hope that's the earliest game when I'm barely paying attention and barely awake. But yeah, I mean, I really like the fact that Darnell Mooney has back-to-back 20-point games. But not only that, it's the fact that he has a 20-point game by PPR, and then he has a bye week, and then he came back and did another 20-point game. So it's not like he just blew up last week because he had an extra week of rest and, he's not as banged up as he was or something like that. I think it's the sign of somebody who's really starting to come on. And the Lions are just the 5th worst defense by DVOA. So they're, you can do some things that I don't know what sort of a fantasy viability this whole game has, but I like Darnell Mooney.
This game has no fantasy viability. Also, it's the 12:30 game, Jordan, so you're fine. Clark, who do you like this week?
So the opposite of my if you're desperate start, Rex Burkhead, if you have an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver, this is going to be a good week to sit A.J. Brown of said Titans. The Pats are just absolutely shutting down number 1 wide receivers. There's only 2 wide receivers that have had over 100 yards against them. One was Chris Moore of Houston, who I think was their wide receiver 3 at the time. And then CeeDee Lamb, who is very good, but he's not the true X wide receiver for the Cowboys. Otherwise, the Patriots haven't been killing people with their stellar offense. They've been shutting people down on defense. And I think, speaking of saying, F it, I'm going to start Rex Burkhead, this is the part of the season where Clark goes, if I can imagine what Bill Belichick is thinking, it's going to be who does Tennessee have other than A.J. Brown? So let's take him out. I don't know. If I could get away with him, I'm starting Tyler Lockett instead of him in one league. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
He's also, just first of all, you never want injuries, but he's been so banged up that there is a good chance that he does leave the game for a period of time. So that's something to take into consideration. But you're totally right, Clark. Without Derrick Henry, without Julio Jones, if A.J. Brown is the only offensive weapon on the field, Bill Belichick's going to be like, great, we're going to quadruple team A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill. Throw to someone else. I dare you. Well, Matt Judon comes in and sacks him 5 times. So yeah, if you can get out from under A.J. Brown this week, if you have the wide receiver depth to not start him, I certainly think that this is not a bad week to fade A.J. Brown. Or if you have a guy who, like a fuck it play at wide receiver who you think could just go off, put him in over Brown. And if he doesn't go off and Brown gives you kind of an okay game, it's like, all right, well, what did you ultimately lose when you could have had, a massive 20-point performance, and A.J. Brown maybe at his ceiling this week gives you 10. Yeah, I like that call. It's ballsy, but I like it. And this is the time of the year to do those.
Yeah, I like A.J. Brown as a top 10 wide receiver overall, in the league. If I'm, drafting wide receivers and I'm the 10th team, I'm picking A.J. Brown at least. But I only think there's a top 6 maybe that are fully matchup proof. You're just putting them out there. It doesn't matter if Jalen Ramsey is on them, or if they're stuck on Revis Island, or if they're hell, playing Patrick Surtain the first.
Give Jair some love, Jordan. I know he hasn't been playing, but Jair, when he's on the field, is a lockdown corner.
Yeah, it's just I don't think AJ Brown is that kind of guy yet, and I also think this Tennessee Titans team, as Clark alluded to earlier, with the loss of Derrick Henry, is just kind of they don't know who they are right now. Luckily, their schedule is pretty soft after New England.
Luckily, they play in the AFC South, so they'll walk their way to a division win and make the playoffs, no problem.
Bolt's coming on though. Speaking of finding MVP
5 touchdown Jonathan Taylor. Holy crap! I want someone, dear listeners, tweet at us at NerdBallFF. I want to see someone who lost and started Jonathan Taylor like that.
Oh, there's been tweets.
Oh, I
didn't write them down.
You didn't write them down. I seen one, which is like, God, he put like 50 points. That's insane.
But I think this was one of my like other big takeaways, and I'll just sneak it in here super quick. The Colts have reestablished themselves as we're going to run the ball, so that diminishes the value for your auxiliary wide receivers like T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal, and certainly Carson Wentz. I feel like Nyheim Hines is probably going to come back to us eventually, but they are just running the ball so well, and they're still in the hunt in the AFC. So like, talk about trends that should continue. Maybe not 50 points a game from Jonathan Taylor, but like, people cannot stop their run game.
No, Jonathan Taylor is on an absolute tear. All right, let's wrap up starts and sits with the tight end position. Ooh, Clark, we're going to start with you because you are our tight end expert over on nerdballff.com. What you got this week?
And so it starts Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold had kind of a weird offseason, went from the Cardinals to the Panthers, and then was traded in season to perhaps the worst team in the league, the Jaguars. Maybe not the worst, but close.
Them in the line.
Dan Arnold's been performing, like not spectacularly, but he's been giving you middle of the road tight end numbers week in and week out. So, if you can swing a trade for him, or if you have him, or if he's out there on the waiver wire, Dan Arnold's become a strong start.
Yeah. I don't love the fact that he's coming off of a 0 target game against the 49ers last week. But before that, I mean, since he's joined the Jaguars, 8 targets, 5 targets, 10 targets, 7 targets, 8 targets. Like he's been the go-to guy in Jacksonville from a target standpoint. And with Jamal Agnew now on IR, or might be even done for the season, who was kind of like emerging as, the number 2 wide receiver or number 2 target in Jacksonville, like we could see even more targets being funneled Dan Arnold's way. And he's going up against the Falcons defense that's like, I don't know, has nothing really to write home about. So I think he's any tight end who can produce like top 5 tight end fantasy numbers without scoring touchdowns to me is sure bet. Love it. I will that's a guy who I will happily take a shot on, because then as soon as you introduce a touchdown to that equation, you're getting a massive outing. Jordan, what tight end are you playing this week? Or do you like, or not like, start or sit? Either one. Take your pick.
I don't really have one that I like or don't like this week. I will say that I just want to have a little bit of accountability on myself here, is that I was doubtful of Hunter Henry a couple of weeks ago, but I want to say that I think he's just a solid play now. Despite the fact that he's, pretty touchdown dependent, I don't think that matters as much, because I love Jonnu Smith, and I think the stuff that he can do is really interesting. But I think Hunter Henry is just he's the complete tight end on the roster. Yeah. And I think that when they have him out there, they're just able to do some things that Jonnu Smith can't do if he's the only tight end out there. Like Hunter Henry is the guy that you can put on the line. He can block in line. He can go and run some really crisp routes. Whereas Jonnu Smith is just the guy you kind of want running around the formation and running around looking for passes. I just like Hunter Henry a lot more now than I did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Hunter, I haven't updated our neck ratings for this week to include week 11 stats, but up until week 10, Hunter Henry, the number 2 tight end in neck rating behind Dawson Knox, who among tight ends who've played at least 5 games. So he's been like, despite the fact that you're right, Jordan has been somewhat touchdown dependent, he's been wildly consistent. And in those touchdowns have come. Jonnu Smith feels like the tight end where people are going to undervalue next year, but next year could be the actual year where we see Jonnu Smith used as that like versatile weapon that everyone kind of anticipated him being in New England, like a full off season to kind of write games for him or to make plans for him and to kind of get him more operating or incorporated in a different way into this offense. I wonder if Jonnu Smith, looking forward to 2022, Jonnu Smith is maybe a sneaky tight end target for 2022. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been with you ranking each week for tight ends. I keep seeing Hunter Henry getting 9 points. So like 2 catches, 11 yards and a touchdown. But you mentioned he's been doing it hyper consistently. And I think that he's been doing it that way because, I mean, this is the training wheels offense that we saw the team try to attach to Cam Newton. And it looked really bad because Cam's not that kind of quarterback and Cam can do a lot of creative things. Mac Jones in his rookie season is showing to fit that West Coast cookie cutter offense very, very well, but hopefully he will improve. And in year 2, Jonnu Smith and some of the downfield threats like Nelson Aguilar and things like that can start getting some reps instead of just running off coverage.
Yeah. Finally, to wrap up the tight end position, I am sitting Jared Cook this week. And that might be like, Pete, who's starting Jared Cook? Well, let me tell you, people, Sleeper app tells you what percentage of leagues on it are starting a player. And there are still way too many leagues out there who are starting Jared Cook. He's gone over 28 yards and 3 catches just once in the last 4 weeks, hasn't scored a touchdown in forever. The Broncos are the 3rd stingiest defense against tight ends fantasy wise, and are the only team to have not allowed a touchdown to the position this year. So I would just confidently step away from Jared Cook. There are so many other tight ends out there who I would rather stream. Jared Cook is not one of those guys. And I would honestly, if you've been holding on to him and hoping that he does something, I just think that at this point in the season, he is worth dropping, and you can grab tight end help elsewhere. That's my view.
I think the Jared Cook play and the Los Angeles Chargers, save for this past weekend where they just dumped a bunch of points. I think not having a tight end has really been the part that's been impacting their offense. Like, we want to see Justin Herbert because he's got just a cannon, and we want to see him sling it downfield to Mike Williams and to cut things up with Keenan Allen on short and intermediate routes. But having a tight end to kind of clear out space, spread the floor, maybe provide Justin Herbert with some extra protection, I don't think they're really getting that strong a play at that position. So it's been tough post Hunter Henry for the Chargers, even though of course they lose him for games all the time when he was playing for them. But I don't know. A lot of people, because of fantasy, don't really take into account how important a really good tight end can be to an offense. And ask the Chargers, ask the Chiefs, ask the Packers. Like, people love having a good tight end. And I didn't mean that to sound as bad as it did, but it's important. Okay.
Get that nice tight end for the quarterback to go hit. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they're often dubbed the security blanket. Is there a guy operating in and around the line of scrimmage that quarterbacks can get the ball off to if they need to? And when you don't have that in your offense, yeah, I think that's a good attribution to where some quarterbacks maybe struggle or offenses look less explosive than they have in the past. Well, there you go. That's all we got for you this week. Starts, sits, recaps, the whole 9 yards. We got you covered. That's all we got. Make sure to rate and subscribe to the podcast on your podcast platform of choice. Follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself at Peter M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark and Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. Make sure you check out all the amazing content we're putting out over on the site at NerdBallFF.com. We're going to have starts and sits coming for you. We got DFS coming for you. Clark dropped some dope player props on a weekly basis. Clark loves it. Loves player props. He was doing so well, and now he's switched platforms.
And Underdog is so much tougher than what was the one already? The DraftKings.
Yeah, DK draft book.
We'll get there. You'll get there.
You'll get there. You're just learning it out. Yeah. Yeah. So make sure you check that out. NerdBallFF.com. Until next week, my fellow nerds.